to the Veterans Writing Community Workshop. It's October 14th. We're here at Mount Carmel Veterans Service Center in Colorado Springs for our Thursday workshop. We are the Veterans Writing Community. We are on a mission to help veterans tell their stories. Let us help you tell yours at veteranswritingcommunity.com or at veteranswritingcommunity@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at Writing Veterans and on YouTube and on Facebook. And if you find this video to be helpful or interesting, please like and share it because it really helps us. I'm Delynn Martineau, and I am a co-founder of the Veterans Writing Community. I'm also a senior instructor with the UCCS Rhetoric and Writing program. In this month's series, we're exploring books that inspired us to write. And last week, we discussed The Things They Carried, which inspired one of the other members of our group to write. And this week, we're going to discuss this book, Opening Up by Writing It Down, which didn't inspire any specific writing, but it did change the way I think about writing. And joining me is Natalie.
Hi, I'm Natalie Bondruchuk. I'm an Air Force veteran who served 4 years, and I'm currently a reservist. I'm also a student at UCCS majoring in biology. I have an internship in genetics, and I'm usually the social media and graphic arts manager for the VWC.
So we have a check-in question for you if you're joining us online. What's the last thing you wrote? So if you would like to join us from afar, you're welcome to post some things in the chat, and we'll be happy to interact with you that way. Also, if you'd like to join us in the stream, you're welcome to join us there too. So just let us know, and we will be happy to connect you with us. So Natalie has some housekeeping and expectations for us before we get started.
All right, so today, while we talk about Delynn's book, there's just a few things to keep in mind. So make sure you have a notebook and pen ready for short writing exercises periodically throughout the 90-minute session. And you'll have at least 20 minutes of ideas on paper when we're done. Another thing just to mention is that we will talk about writing as being therapeutic, but we are not therapists, and tonight's writing is not meant to be taken as therapy or as its substitute. So also don't be afraid to post questions in the comments during a reading or discussion. We want everyone to be involved, and we want to have a conversation. And we may share our own writing, and if you feel comfortable, we encourage you to as well. And also don't forget to like and share our videos so your friends can enjoy them too. And if you're watching this after our live broadcast, use the hashtag replay to let us know. And
I think we should write.
All right. So we're going to do our first 5-minute writing sprint. And pretty much during this, we're going to have 5 minutes up on a timer and just keep writing, don't stop. But we encourage you to change topics if you want to. But we're going to give you 2 prompts in the comments. And our prompts for this first 5-minute writing sprint are: write about a teacher who influenced your early writing habits, and what is a lazy Saturday like? All right, looks like we got 5 minutes up, and let's get started. And we got about 1 minute left. And about 10 seconds. Okay. Dot your T's, cross your eyes, right?
Yeah, so this book, Opening Up by Writing It Down, is by James Pennebaker and Josh Smyth, and it's kind of glary. You can't really see it there, but these guys they're both psychologists, and they've done some pioneering research in how expressive writing helps your brain process trauma. And so, because I'm a writing instructor, I became interested in how writing affects the way you think and the way you process information. And so, reading this book was kind of the next natural step in my evolution as I learn about writing. So, it describes expressive writing as writing for 15 to 20 minutes a day for 3 to 4 days in a row about an upsetting experience. They say it's not like journaling or fiction or nonfiction or academic writing. It's like self-help therapy. It doesn't work for everyone, but it does work for most people. There's no formula or one way that works for everybody, but writing does help in ways that other kinds of processing may not. And this book looks at writing studies across multiple decades and projects so that readers get a really longitudinal look and much more comprehensive look, I think, at writing's effect on mental and emotional healing. So for those people who might think that therapy is not an option that they want to pursue as far as dealing with mental health, that sitting down and writing when you know nobody else is going to see it, nobody's going to psychoanalyze it, nobody's going to pick it apart and try to find your faults with it, nobody's going to look at your grammar. That's part of the reason it becomes therapeutic, is because it's just a way for you to clear some brain space. So I have some areas in here that I like to kind of share, because I think there are some parts that really kind of make sense. So as you're hearing some of these, feel free to kind of chime in, because I think part of this comes through in stuff I teach, but part of it is not stuff I teach. Okay. So it says, and this is on page 155, it says, in the weeks or months after a major upheaval, expressive writing can promote healing among several dimensions. One, the mere acknowledgement that the event occurred. Just labeling the actions and emotions starts to produce structure and create categories and order that makes sense from the writer's perspective. So I really like that, because writing something down after a traumatic event can help you kind of make sense of it.
I agree.
So, yeah, I thought
that's helpful. Yeah.
Very helpful. The next one, writing forces additional structure on the experience. A timeline is identified and possible causes and effects are explored. And I like that, because when we remember things, we don't remember them in the same order that they happened. And there's some events that get stuck in your brain, and writing it out in a timeline can kind of help sequentialize things in a way that makes you understand it better. The next one, multiple perspectives and additional complexities of the experience can be added to the narrative, which can include tying the event to other relevant ones that may have occurred prior, during, or after the experience. So just writing about it is good, but then going back and rereading it and adding to it can help too. I thought that was interesting. With continued writing and thinking, perhaps especially so when adapting a self-distance perspective, a more coherent narrative can emerge with a clear beginning, middle, and end. I've been working with a veteran on telling his life story. And so instead of, I spend time with him each week, and we sit down and we make recordings. And so one of the things that I think is this book really helped me with is that, as understanding that getting somebody to sit down and tell their story from beginning to end is less productive than just letting them talk and tell stories, and getting engaged with this person just about whatever comes to mind. I think the more videos that we make, the more it will be easier to develop a timeline, but then it's not the veteran's responsibility to develop that timeline. It's mine. So that will happen during the editing process. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then let's see, with repeated telling, the story becomes simpler, more understandable, and more coherent.
Mm-hmm.
And then as people move through the upheaval, they sleep better and have reductions in biological and psychological markers of long-term stress. And then the last one, with greater working memory and lower stress levels, people can begin to devote more time to friends and enjoy higher quality relationships. Indeed, the boost in social support can help maintain better health in the future. So these guys really go through a lot of what lasting effects writing can have over time. And I think that's really, really important when it comes to figuring out how this all works within your daily routine and developing a set of good, healthy habits.
Yeah.
So are you a writer? Do you write often?
I probably should write more. I've definitely been liking to write poetry more, and I've been finding that to be what that definitely went along with some of the things you said, like being able to just kind of put it down and think about it and giving myself a place to kind of de-stress. And I think that's helped me. That's why I really like the last one you read, how, once you kind of, de-stress and you're around people, it opens up more social experiences, and that can kind of just help you be better, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like in a therapeutic way.
And I like the one that says it kind of clears your headspace and gives you more working memory. We always talk about how bandwidth, we always think, oh man, well, there's so much stress and there's so much going on in my life. I just don't have the bandwidth to handle another thing. But writing can really kind of get some of that out of your head onto paper and make space and widen your bandwidth. And I think that's really important when it comes to, processing, especially when you're processing trauma, because trauma doesn't just take up the headspace where you're using rational thought. Usually it's the limbic system, the emotional and kind of basic parts of your brain that are instinctual. Those can get taken up too, and can really kind of dysregulate your whole system.
Well, I do wonder if just the process of writing a to-do list, just something as simple as that can give you just a little bit of wiggle room. Like when you just have so much going on in your head and you're like, oh, I have to do this thing and this thing, just getting it down. Yeah. I feel like that can also apply.
Yeah, and I make a list every day of stuff that I have to do, so I don't forget things. And I think that's really smart. But I mean, it really makes things really trite, like you should keep sticky notes next to the bed, so if you think of something in the middle of the night, you
write it down.
You can write it down. I think that's really helpful. One of the things that I think that I took away from this book is to be more intentional about my writing. And so I think that really helps move that forward a lot. So Wonderful.
All right.
So
Well, would you say it's time for another writing sprint?
I think so. I think we
Alright.
should throw it in there just for the heck of it and see what happens.
Here's to what's happening. So our next one is going to be a 10-minute writing sprint. And again, write till the timer stops. If you need to change topics, change topics. And our 2 prompts for this sprint is notes, lists, and forms. Write about the types of writing that make your life easier or better. And our other one is can, go, write about dancing. So let's get our timer up. And there's our 10 minutes, and let's begin.
I want to be a little closer.
Okay. Got about 5 minutes left. About 1 minute left. Okay, got about 10 seconds. And wrap up your sentences, and we're done.
All right, so I've got some, I've got other stuff I want to kind of pick out of this book too, because a lot of the things that they say in here, they've got some. They look at studies over a long period of time, over decades, and so they're looking at studies about whether writing really helps people or not. And what they're finding is that even over decades of time, the same types of patterns are coming up. And so basically there's a kind of a set of things that you get out of writing therapeutically. One is an immediate increase in feelings of sadness and anxiety after writing, which I thought was like, that's weird. Why would you feel sad after you write? But if you're writing about a traumatic experience, they equate it to feeling sad after you watch a sad movie. So like if you go to the theater and you see a really sad movie and you feel kind of down afterwards, but it only lasts a couple hours. What they're saying is that that's a temporary thing, but there are some positive results. Long-term drops in visits to the health center for illness. They said those who wrote about emotional upheavals had half the number of illness-related visits to the health center in 6 months after the studies. So it's looking like there are some kind of undefined physical health results from that. And I think that's kind of interesting. And then the last thing they list is a greater sense of value and meaning as a result of writing. So not only did people express this in questionnaires afterwards, but people would sometimes stop them and thank them for letting them be in an experiment, which is kind of
Interesting.
yeah, it's interesting that they would be thanked. But yeah, so I decided to kind of use writing. I decided to use myself kind of as a guinea pig with writing, and to see if there's some way that I could kind of measure this in my own life and see how it worked. So almost 3 years ago, on December 1st of 2018, that's when the veterans writing community came to mind, and it came to Andrew and I as we met at a writing event. There was a month-long writing event, and we sat down and kind of talked about our own writing. And I had had a traumatic event happen to me like 7 years prior to that I had never written about. And I thought, well, let's see what happens. What would happen if I wrote about this traumatic event? Because it was still bothering me. I was still thinking about it every single day. I was still trying to process it and still trying to kind of reconcile it. There was a pretty significant moral injury that I had suffered, that, I was being accused of doing things that I hadn't done. And it was just really hard. And so, but it just kept getting stuck in my brain. And I thought, okay, well, what happens if I write about this? And then I print it. And then I delete the file, give this printed version to Andrew, let him read it, and then with the idea that he'll destroy it when he's done, and then we'll see what happens to it. And that's what we did. And so somewhere along mid-December or so, I handed him the writing. He took it, he read it. We talked about the traumatic situation, and then I destroyed the document, and we went on about our way with that. And I will tell you, not only was that the start of a really great friendship, but it also was the start of my brain being clear of being plagued by this incident. And it was a pretty significant, part of my life. And I was really having a hard time getting past it. But just purging it and knowing that purge doesn't exist anymore because it got thrown out, really helped. It really helped. And I realized that, just like they were saying, the telling and the retelling gets faster, it gets shorter, because you don't need all those details because they're not in your brain anymore. And I think that really helps you kind of process it differently every time the story comes out. So
yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
And so that was kind of the genesis of, okay, if I'm feeling so much better, I wonder what would happen if we got other people to feel better about, thinking about that.
Yeah.
What would happen if we could bring that same feeling of catharsis to other people? And so that's where the veterans writing community was born. So, and so I've really devoted the last 3 years of my life to writing and thinking about writing a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I realize that's what I do for a living, but
to take it to another level of writing, not just to teach about writing, but to, make it personal, make it about the experience, not just because you have to write, but because you want to write.
Yeah, and I do write for an online literary magazine. I do articles occasionally, but it's not the same as expressive writing. I think expressive writing is a lot of it takes a habit, and I think it really does help. And they do suggest that you do. I think they said, what was it? Writing for 20 to 30 minutes, 3 or 4 times in a row. But I also think it depends on if you write about the same event from different perspectives. I think that helps too. So if you think about writing, if you have a specific traumatic event in mind, the first time you write about it, you might want to write about the sequence of events as you remember them happening. And then after that, the next time you write about it, go back and write about how you were feeling or what you were thinking at the time that it happened. And then going back the next time, the third time, and writing about maybe what would somebody who's watching it think about it. And then the last time you write about it, reflect over what that experience of writing about it really had for you.
Yeah, I like that. Breaking it down to give yourself, a chance to process every angle of it. So then when you're done, like in your situation where you were ready to let it go, or even if you want to come back to it, you can kind of go, oh, this is what I was thinking in this moment, or this was what somebody else felt, and I think it gives you perspective on your own writing.
Yeah, and I have to say, since writing about that traumatic series of events, it hasn't been plaguing my mind daily. It hasn't, except when I deliberately pick it out and think about it and talk about it. It doesn't cross my mind. And so that's a gift in itself. So I'm not saying that happens for everybody, and I'm not saying my events were traumatizing enough to be, cause me permanent physical and emotional issues, but
it was still your experience.
Yeah.
And I think that shouldn't be discredited because it's all your personal experience.
Yeah. Well, we always talk about you shouldn't compare traumas with people, right? Like just because I didn't lose a leg doesn't mean I'm not, traumatized.
Yeah, you all
right?
our own experiences.
Yeah. So, and that's something that's, I think, important to remember in all of this too, is that you shouldn't measure your own trauma just against somebody else's. Because your trauma is your trauma, and how you deal with it is something that you deal with in your own time and your own space.
Yeah. I'm paraphrasing, but I remember seeing like a quote of some sort where it was like, just because I think it's a big deal and you don't, doesn't mean it's not a big deal. Because it's all just about in this moment, this may be a big deal to me, and nobody should have to tell you like, well, you're overreacting. Well, it's like, no, I'm not. This is my big deal. And I think that speaks a lot to how this writing, because, we're all processing, and we can, this book gives you such a good way of also, constructing it, where you're like, I don't know where to start. And this book's like, well, start here. Just write it down. That's the first step. Get the paper, get the pen, write it down.
Yeah, and they also suggest writing down whatever is on your mind the most. So there's got to be something that's on your mind right now that's really bothering you. And so even if it's not that traumatic event or series of events, or maybe it's not something you've dealt with for a long time. If there's something that keeps coming up, oh man, I got to remember that thing, or I've got to do that thing, then that's what you write about, whatever's at the top of your mind. I've started, because of this book, I've started having my students spend the first 5 minutes of class writing, and I do give them a prompt, but I always tell them, if this prompt doesn't do anything for you, then write about whatever is on your mind.
Yeah.
And that just kind of gets them in the right mindset for class, and it also helps them clear some headspace and get ready for the tasks at hand. So I think that's really important. So I've got one more section in here that I think is important, and you kind of touched on it there with your response. And it's the downside of writing. A lot of times people think a definition is just what something is, but this book kind of goes into what it isn't. And I thought that was kind of important to bring up. So one of the things they say is, if you're using writing as a substitute for action, writing is really good to deal with issues that are uncontrollable, like death or other trauma, because that can help us sort out complicated feelings and other things. But they also say, it also, if you're using it as a substitute for action, like if I write this down, then I can get it off my mind and I don't have to worry about taking action. If you can, it can be counterproductive. So if you can do something to change an unpleasant situation, you're much better off changing it than merely writing about it.
Yes. Well, I agree with that. Yeah, because it's the whole, actions speak louder than words.
That's
right there.
And writing is not an excuse to stay stuck in your room, not doing anything.
Just to fill your notebook up, and you're like, okay, I feel better. Well, you didn't do anything per se.
You probably could have done something more productive. Is your writing an intellectual rather than a self-reflective exercise? That's another question too. So there is this section in here that I want to read. It says, it's grand to be smart, but intelligence and a classical education do not guarantee anyone emotional stability or personal insight. If you find that your writing often moves in a safe and non-personal direction, where you're citing the work of Virginia Woolf to explain the ultimate failure of Napoleon or whatever, your writing might be quite interesting and even publishable, but don't expect intellectualization to improve your health.
Yep.
And that's the thing, is that we always talk about writing for different purposes and audiences, and we talk about paying attention to whether or not your audience is going to understand what you say.
Yep.
But with if your writing is overly intellectual, you're not getting at the real emotional part of it, which is what expressive writing is designed to do.
Yes.
So they also mention, are you using writing as a forum for uncensored complaining? Which I thought was a really great one. So there's a lot of people who just vent in their writing. So they mention about how there's studies out there that blindly venting anger is not necessarily productive, because sometimes it can make you madder to do that. And it says that increases your blood pressure, encourages us to think of alternative or additional acts of vengeance. But the key is to write with self-reflection. So you can write about those, thoughts of vengeance. You can write about all these traumatic things, but you really need to focus on making sure that you reflect about those things.
Yeah, and just understanding why you decided to write those things down. At least that's how I interpret it. Like the why of why did I get to this point? That these are the things that I chose to write down. And I think that's how you can self-reflect the best way. Just ask yourself, what does this make me feel? Why do I feel this way? And what can I do with it?
Yeah, and I think that's, as long as it's, go ahead and complain in your writing all you want, but go back and look at those complaints and say, is there anything I can do about this? Or how do I feel now that it's all out? Or is there anything I could have done differently? Or, how can I take ownership of my part of the problem? That sort of stuff, I think it says people rehearse the events in their minds and in conversations thousands of times, but have not explored either their emotions or the meaning of the events in their lives. So over-disclosing is much like a verbal form of obsessive thinking. People talk or write about various aspects of trauma without integrating the pieces or making any progress in making sense of their experiences, which I think is really the key to expressive writing actually having those health benefits that they talk about. And then they've got one more here. Is your writing an exercise in self-reflection or self-absorption?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's valuable for people to stand back and reflect on who they are as people, why they behave in the ways they do, and how and why they respond emotionally. So self-reflection provides a form of feedback so we can decide whether we need to adjust our life course or not. Periodic self-reflection is healthy, but it can be carried to an extreme. So we don't need to dissect whether or not we should drink a cup of coffee or, should I have this donut? We don't need to do a bunch of self-reflection. I'm reminded of that poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. It's a very long poem, but one of the things is the guy is stuck on the stairs and he's got a peach and he looks at it and he says, "Dare I to eat a peach?" Like, do we need to do that much reflection? Probably not. To the point where you get stuck in the middle of the stairs. You can't even finish going down the stairs until you've made up your mind whether this is something you want to do. You're so stuck in self-reflection. But I think that giving yourself some space to look back on how you have changed since the experience and looking at how you view yourself sort of in a more global sense, I think that's a good thing. One of the questions that I have been asked that I think about a lot is, how do I want to be viewed? What are some of the qualities that I want to be known for?
What do you have any that you'd be wanting?
Oh yeah,
I
got them in here.
I'd like to hear this. I really would.
So and I wrote this right on the second page of my journal. Love, patience, kindness, understanding, consideration, thoughtfulness, moderation, sense of humor, calmness, reliability, intelligence, self-reliance, happiness, compassion, authenticity, and empathy.
I do have a question based off your list. Is there like a certain reason why you put ones as the first things, or is it all just an encompassing of overall you'd like to be known for all of those, or was there a reason like I
rank them?
Yeah, is there a rank?
No, I don't think there's a rank. It's just I suppose I could rank them, but I don't know. I kind of want to be sort of well-rounded. I want to be a person that people can look at as somebody who knows themselves and who is confident in who they are. And I've had some major changes in my life recently, and it's been very hard to figure out who I am without certain people in my life. So now that those people have decided to move on, where am I without them? And that's kind of an interesting way of thinking. I did want to share part of a diary entry that I wrote. None of what I write has any kind of a pattern. I don't keep a journal. I mean, I do have this thing, but it's got random things in it. I don't date it most of the time. I usually don't go back and read what I've written in there. It just kind of is a brain dump kind of a thing. But I use like a note-taking app for some of the things that I write, and sometimes I do voice to text, and sometimes I do other things. But I'm doing this with the idea of, okay, if I do open up by writing it down, what effect is that having on me spiritually, physically, emotionally, and how is that helping me discover who that person is? And so this is a journal entry that I call On Grief. What I'm experiencing right now is a form of grief. So I'm going to try to explain how it feels, what things I'm grieving, what things I can let go of, and things that I would need to know and would be nice to know. My grief is not about death, but I have been through a traumatic situation. And just like grief when you lose somebody, my grief comes in waves. I have good days and good subjects and bad subjects. Just like with post-traumatic stress, I have things that trigger me. I have nightmares. I have an erratic attention span. I react impulsively. Most of the time I feel pretty good, but sometimes I really get down on myself because I dwell on the things I was labeled as inadequate, judgmental, complacent, oblivious. I try not to dwell on these things, and I have lots of people who tell me these things aren't true, but sometimes when I wake up at 3 a.m., I can't get it all out of my head. I think the thing I'm grieving the most is loss of trust, because when you trust somebody with your whole heart, your vulnerabilities, and your deepest concerns and dreams, you trust that they will accept you for who you are. You don't expect a whole argument to be based on a single fault that you trusted had been accepted a long time ago. In just a few months, I've come to understand that almost nothing I believed for 30 years to be true is true. Finding my way now is difficult, but I know my truth, and that's all that matters. So I think changing my habits about writing, changing the way I think about writing, not just writing for somebody else's purpose, a purpose that gets thrust in front of me, I think has really helped me think about writing differently.
Yeah.
So.
And that was beautiful.
Really?
I love that. Yeah. Well, I think I also can relate to it in certain ways. So, but I enjoyed hearing that because I think it became in my eyes in that moment very authentic. And that's one of the things that you want to be seen as. And that to me was genuine authenticity. Like speaking about who you are and what you feel. And I think it's a beautiful thing.
Well, certainly when I wrote that, I did not expect to be broadcasting it to the world. But, when trying to decide, I knew I wanted to share something that I wrote, but trying to decide what that was and what effect that would have, how I would be viewed, is certainly something that I thought about when choosing what I wrote. So I know, of course, I had to take all the personal stuff out of it.
Oh, of course. Yeah. So I think there's, we even went on it last week on mission. There's certain things that, you don't want to tell everybody. But I think as long as you can get what you want to share out there and it has an effect or it feels good to you, then I think there's something great about that.
I'll buy that for $1. One of the things that they mention in the book is that writing regularly, whether it's about trauma or not trauma, just writing about things that bother you, is like preventive maintenance. And I kind of liked that because it's kind of like getting your oil changed and getting your tires rotated. Those are things that you do to keep your car going so that it doesn't leave you by the side of the road on a rainy afternoon. But I think making it a habit to make writing your go-to thing. Like, okay, well, I really need to talk about this, but I don't have a therapy appointment for another week. Okay, if you write it down, then you'll have something you can take to your therapy appointment. or
you can remember, or
or you don't, maybe you don't want to go to therapy. Maybe if this therapy is not your thing, then writing can kind of help you be your own therapist.
Yes. Well, yeah, I agree with that. And I think therapy works. Yeah. It can work in a way where sometimes you're like, I really need therapy. And sometimes you're like, I'm actually doing okay, but I feel overwhelmed, or I feel stressed, and just expressing it in that moment to just put it on paper instead of doing something impulsive, or instead of doing something where you're like, I can't funnel my stress properly, so I'm freaking out.
Yeah, and that keeps you from getting behind the wheel of a car and driving really
Yep.
fast,
Yeah.
or considering thoughts that are, of suicide or of desperation of any kind. And it really helps you, especially if you're feeling anger toward another person. It really helps you channel that into something a lot more safe. There's a lot of wisdom in that. Don't email when you're mad. Even if you write the email and you leave it in your draft box overnight, sometimes that can help keep you from sending an email that has any kind of inflammatory language in it, and that can kind of help you.
I think it's all about tone too, because there's been plenty of mad emails I have typed up, but then I'll be like, well, I need to send this email in this moment, so I'll pull somebody who's not upset and I'll go, can you just read this and tell me, do I sound terrible right now? Am I doing a wrong thing? And then they'll either be like, oh, you shouldn't send it. Oh no, it's okay, you're being assertive, label it something else.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know, and sometimes if there's an email where you need to address a lot of points, some points make you more angry than others, and so you'll throw in a little sidelong sort of passive aggressive sort of thing in there, and that somebody else's eyes on your work are always good, especially in a situation like that. I agree, for sure.
All right, well, are we ready to do our last writing sprint?
Sure. I think that sounds great.
Okay.
What are we doing this time?
So, for this last 10-minute sprint, our prompts are, what could you write about that could clear some headspace? Or write about that kid in an early classroom schoolyard experience.
That kid?
Is it that kid? The bully kid?
I think we all know somebody who is that kid. Maybe it's the nose picker or something.
Yeah, any that kid you can think of, you can write about. But let's get our 10 minutes up and let's begin writing. about 5 minutes left. About 1 minute left. Okay, wrap up your sentence and We are done.
All right. So we just heard from Michelle Labassi, and so I want to bring that in there. She says, your writing prompts are always interesting. Some are silly, some are serious, and some are thought-provoking. Good section to work through. Good selection to work through. Yeah, when we make these, we usually try to have one kind of heavy one and one sort of lighter one, and then that way, and always with the understanding that if neither one of them appeals to you, write about whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is just to write, and one of the things we like about these workshops is that we have really, really, really busy lives, and we know we have busy lives, and so one of the things we really like to do is to, when we do these workshops, we intentionally stop and write during the workshops, because not only do participants walk away with 25 minutes of good writing done, but we walk away with 25 minutes of good writing done in ways that we never expected. Like, I just wrote about that kid.
I cleared headspace.
Oh, you did?
I needed to clear some headspace. Just
Oh, nice.
school.
I want to read you this because it's fun.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so that kid for me is Danny Watkins. That kid. When I was 8, I used to sit next to Mary Lou Shawless on the bus, and for 90 minutes each way, we did homework, played with clay, or chatted about school until Danny Watkins got on the bus. He was horrible. He bullied the little kids who sat on the front of the bus, including me. I was afraid of him.
No.
One time he got on the bus and said to me, "Hey, want to be my pal?" And after months of fear, I was thrilled he had finally changed his mind. And I said, yes. And he said, okay, personal ass licker.
Oh my gosh.
Which made me laugh when I was writing it. But I was horrified. Fortunately, my older brothers who sat in the back of the bus overheard this little exchange. And after that day, Danny never spoke to me again. So, now I can laugh about that stuff, but I can remember how traumatizing that was for me as a kid. I mean, I wasn't allowed to use curse words. I had, my parents were very careful with their language around us, and we were, that was not acceptable. And so to have this kid just say that to me, like, oh, I was shocked. So anyway.
That is a that kid.
That is a that kid. That kid. Ah. So one of the things that, and I appreciate that, Michelle. So thank you very much for interacting with us. I really appreciate when people connect with us through our broadcasts. So one of the things that we're trying to do with the October series is to connect with our 4 tenets. And so normally at the end of a workshop, we'll bring up the 4 tenets and talk about how they work in writing in general. But I want to tie them into this book, and I also want to tie it into my own writing too. So the first tenet is, who are you writing this to? Who is your audience? So I think the audience for this book is academics, maybe therapists, those who are interested in therapeutic writing. But it's also anybody who's interested in writing that can make a difference in their life. For my own writing, most of the writing that I do that's related to this type of expressive writing, it's just me. I'm really not thinking about sharing much of my stuff with anybody, but I think there's value in that too, knowing that you can write stuff down and no one has to see it. That is really, it can be cathartic in itself, knowing that nobody sees your stuff. But then I think the other thing about it is that if you do want to share it, you can always put it aside and let it sit there for a few months and then reread it. And if you decide you want to share it, all you have to do is change the audience. So who you're writing this to changes when you decide that you want to publish. And I wanted to bring that up specifically because we offer opportunities for veterans to publish. I think you're working toward publication too. I think that's really cool. So we have a publication in the veterans writing community called the After Action Review. I have a copy right here of our latest journal. We publish in January each year, and we work with veterans for publication who are interested in getting their voices, getting their word out there. We publish poetry, we publish nonfiction, creative nonfiction. We do personal reflection. There's even veteran artwork on the front of this one. So if you want to see that a little bit closer, our After Action Review is on our website at veteranswritingcommunity.com, and you can check that out and see what some of our veterans have written. So I think for the second tenet, will your audience understand everything you say? I think that this comes across as kind of conversational, but also authoritative, because they relate their personal experiences with all the research that they do, but they also talk about their discoveries through research. And as far as my own writing goes, I don't really date or organize my entries. So if someone were to stumble upon my Evernote app or my diary here, it's not even really a diary, it's just kind of a collection of stuff, but I don't know if anybody could even make sense out of it. Do you write in like every day, or
So I actually, in this one, when I got this as a gift, and I tried to first write in it as like a personal journal, and mine's also kind of turned into like a whole thing of just different writings that I've thrown in there, don't read, because I found that when I was young, in like middle school to high school age, from like, I don't know, 12 to 14, I kept a few journals because my older sister wrote, and I thought, oh, I should write too. I want to be like my older sister. And I found that reading them as an adult, I'm like, well, what the heck was I saying? What was going on in my mind? And so I think it's more of, just getting it down. And I don't tend to read what I write. I'm very particular about that.
Wow. When I was a kid, my parents gave me a 5-year diary, and it was about this big. It was really tiny, and it's a 5-year diary, so it had 365 pages divided into 5 sets of 4 lines each, and so you were supposed to keep a diary for 5 years. And then so I found myself writing, woke up, had breakfast, went to school, came home, had dinner, watched TV, went to bed, like over and over and over. And I'm like, is that how my early years of life were really like? I don't even think that's true. But when it comes to understanding everything that you say, it depends on who your audience is. So that's why our first tenet is, who are you writing this to? Because if you don't understand who your audience is, you can't appeal to them successfully. So that's so who knows? I mean, I may, something like I just read something random that I just wrote a few minutes ago, and who knows, it might be entertaining
later on.
Later on.
You're like, oh, I remember that day.
So the third tenet is the story all there, or are there parts you left out? And as far as this book goes, I'd like to see more on how a change in habits helps over long periods of time. So they go over some of the studies about how writing clears your headspace. And they talk about how, although you might feel bad after writing about a traumatic experience, you feel bad with it for a couple hours, but then in the weeks and months afterwards, you feel a lot better. I'd like to know if that's permanent or not. And so I'm going to kind of pay attention to that in my own life, because I don't have any other way of researching that. I mean, you can't really do a longitudinal research study where you have people come in and write about a traumatic experience, and then 2 weeks later you check on them, and then 2 more weeks later you check on them, and then 2 years later you check on them. So, and I think just reflective writing to see if it's helping will be the only way I can really measure. So I hope to kind of fill in the gaps as I go. I think that'll be kind of interesting. So And then the fourth tenet is, why are you writing specifically about this thing, whatever this thing is? And so I kind of use this type of writing as a catharsis. I don't really keep a regular writing schedule or anything. I use a note-taking app. I have this book. I make lists a lot. So I write about this, whatever this is, because this is on my mind at the moment. And so I think writing in the moment, once I write it, it's not so prominent anymore. And yeah, I keep a book of sticky notes in the bedside table next to the bed. And it's kind of funny because I'll think of something, but I don't want to turn my light on or my phone on or anything because it'll kill my eyes, right? So I write in the dark. I will scribble something in the dark and hope that in the morning it will be enough to keep my memory. So when I wake up, I can put it on my list. But yeah, so really it's not, I just write about whatever this is because it's on my mind. And I think that's important. Since I have been more intentional about doing it, since opening up by writing it down, I have decided to become more intentional about writing about the thing that is most prominent on my mind. And even if I've written about it before, if I have written about it by hand, if I put it on the computer, if I've done voice to text, if I have, whatever it is, I have found that there's a lot more headspace. I've gotten a lot more bandwidth. They always say that when your life gets complicated, your bandwidth gets thinner. You can't really deal with all the problems in your life. And I don't know if it's writing. I don't know if it's meditation. I don't know if it's, I try to do a lot of things to make my life better, but certainly having that stuff out of my head and out, not occupying that headspace anymore has made me a healthier person. I am sure of it.
Oh, that's why I chose to write about headspace during our sprint. Because I was like, I need to just get stuff down because there's a lot spinning around, and already I felt a little lighter. I wrote it down. Okay, it's in there. I know how I'm feeling, and I'm kind of able to just move a little more forward.
So when you write, do you write about events or do you write about feelings?
I do both. I also tend to when I write, especially if I'm just getting stuff out of my head, it'll be like, this is how I feel, period. This is how I feel, period. And it'll kind of just turn into tiny sentences of just this is what's going on here. And then I'll completely redirect. It's basically rambling for me when I write. It's the things that I wouldn't actually say I put on paper.
Well, that's good because nobody wants to be rambling when they're, talking.
Yes. So that's why I just
don't want to seem like you're
I have this and this and this.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, very cool. So I don't know. This is not a book for everybody. It's not really something that, unless you're an academic, it's not really something that you want to want to read. But if you do, it's got some really interesting information about writing and writing process theory, and especially the subtitle of it is How Expressive Writing Improves Health and Eases Emotional Pain. So I really do think that writing often has helped me process some of the trauma in my life. So I recommend it because it's very helpful. So, all right. So how about some closing announcements?
All right. Well, thank you all for being here. And you don't have to share what you wrote with us today, but if you do share, you can contact us through our website at veteranswritingcommunity.com. And also, don't forget, next week we have our third workshop where I will be hosting the book Homebody. It's going to be here at Mount Carmel again on the October 21st at 5 p.m. So join through Facebook or come in person if you can. We are recording these sessions, so if you're watching this on hashtag replay, like and share this video and tell your friends if you found it interesting, fun, or helpful. And please put those thoughts and reactions in the comments section. And also, we just have a few follow-up activities that, you don't have to do them, but I think are so helpful. So just afterwards, maybe consider doing a 20-minute sprint, just a sprint to follow up or finish thoughts, or, just further develop something that you decided to write down. And you can also email us or visit our website for any follow-up with us too, or to arrange one-on-one work towards publication.
And we do have a critique session coming up at the end of November for people who are working toward publication in January. So more information is going to be coming out about that very soon. But if you are interested in working toward publication, just shoot us an email at veteranswritingcommunity@gmail.com, and we'll start the ball rolling with you, because it's we think that there is something to be gained, not just from writing about stuff, but from getting published and getting your word out there. Right? We think that's really, really, it gives you a whole new sense of yourself when you know your word have gotten out there. I know when we published Andrew for the first time, we published a poem that he brought up when he talked about his last, when he talked about his book in the last workshop. Within 3 days, that poem got over 100 likes, and that was something that neither of us expected. And it was so great to just watch him just open up, and he really had a real shift in how he thought about himself from that into the positive. So publication is that same kind of catharsis, I think, but in a different way. So it's definitely worth it. So anyway, so and I was also thinking, we've got 6 prompts, but we only had 3 writing sprints. So if there are other, if you want to spend some time after we're done here, you could address some of those other prompts that we asked. You'd have plenty of time to do that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, they were all good. They were good ones.
They really were, and I was having a hard time deciding.
Yes,
on some
me
of them.
too.
So
absolutely.
Anyway, thank you everyone for being with us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you next week when Natalie's going to talk about her book, Homebody.
All right. Well, bye.